So people seem pretty weirded out by this whole new Tesla Cybertruck. It's too radical a design, people say it's ugly, people say it's not going to suit the pickup truck market and it's going to fail, and so on and so on. If you ask me, I think we may have just witnessed the first step in Tesla taking pole position of the automotive industry. I'll explain why. The first thing to notice with the Cybertruck is just how different it is from all the other Tesla designs. Some might say it's a little too different. Personally, I think it looks awesome. I absolutely love it, and if I had a need for a pickup truck, I would absolutely buy that because it's just badass, I think. But I'm a creative and I don't have any need for such a thing. The problem with the pickup crowd market is that things like tradesmen and farmers, they tend to be very conservative in their tastes. So the fact that it does stand out so radically would be the very reason why they wouldn't choose it. I've seen comments stating that the target market are simply just going to hate this truck and completely reject it. But those comments are being made under the assumption that those tradesmen and farmers are the target market. I might be seeing things a little bit differently because in my books, I write about this very thing. And when I saw that Cybertruck roll up onto that platform, things just clicked right into place for me. And personally, I can't think of a better move Tesla could have made. See, I actually don't think Tesla much care about the pickup market. At least, I think they're nice to have. I don't think they're the priority. To me, there are three customers for who that Cybertruck is designed for. And a farmer, a tradesman, and the weekend warrior are not it. So who are these three customers? D, O, and D. You only need to look back across the history of both SpaceX and Tesla to see that what they've just done is the same first step that Elon Musk takes in everything he does. Elon Musk plays the long-term game. He's thinking 10 years, 20 years, 50 years down the track. If there's one thing that modern day investors are really bad at, it is seeing the long-term game. They get too lost in their own shit that they completely lose the forest for the trees. And even now, after 10 years, I think Tesla has been in play, even now they're still not looking at the long-term game. They're only reacting to these individual little products which come out because that's what they think the company is looking at here. That's what most companies look at. They always plan around an individual product or a service line or whatever. But that's not how Elon Musk thinks. No first step in Elon Musk's playbook is designed for profit. And that Cybertruck is far too divergent from the regular aesthetic. It's too unique to not be a first step in some grand plan. When you look into Tesla and SpaceX's foundations, they're not based on these products. They're based on narrative. SpaceX, for example, is based upon the concept of making humanity an interstellar species. Now, Mars is a tangible step along that line, but in order to get to Mars, they have to develop the lander, they have to refine the Starship, they have to get those rocket boosters being reusable again, and before all of that, the very first step was to make rockets themselves as cheap to manufacture as possible. It was getting the costs down for space travel. That's the priority, the initial priority. When you look at Tesla, it's a similar thing. The narrative there is to establish electric cars in the culture. Now with Tesla, it has to work in two parts. The ultimate goal has to be manufacturing an affordable, accessible car, reliable car for the mainstream market. And also, in addition to that, in order to get that car into the culture, you have to found the infrastructure as well. In this case, it's the power banks, the charge stations, and so on. How Tesla began that, though, was through the Tesla Roadster. And that was actually a Lotus Elise body, which they licensed in order to use as a proof of concept for the tech. Once they had that running around, then that was actually showing investors that this was actually something viable. That's when they started focusing on the Tesla S. Now, the Tesla S was never meant to be the mainstream product. That was the show pony. That's what they use to put the numbers up on the charts and to get the celebrities driving it around and to actually sort of plant the Tesla name in the headlights, so to speak. The companion to that was the Tesla X, the SUV. That's still a little too upper market for what the ultimate goal is, but that puts the rich young families in the Tesla care as well. The main goal, the ultimate goal, and Elon Musk said this right from the start, was the Tesla 3. That is the mass-produced, cheap, reliable, mainstream, everyman car that they could put into as many homes as they could possibly make and really establish the electric car culture for good. But in order to properly cement the Tesla 3 into the mainstream mindset and its accessibility and its feasibility as a mainstream product, you have to also cement the infrastructure as well. You have to get charge stations all over the world. The open sourcing of the Tesla engines that they made years ago, in the beginning, I think, that was an attempt at that. That was in order to try and get the competition to adopt the same charge stations and therefore cementing the Tesla power stations. I can't remember what they're called. Are they charge stations? I'm not sure, but you know what I mean. That was the attempt to get the competition using that same infrastructure and cementing that in. The power walls and the solar tiles, they were obviously attempts in order to get the capability into people's homes, therefore spreading it out further. And the Tesla Semi as well. That was an opportunity to put the electric concept into the mainstream industries and have them spread out the network, the infrastructure themselves. But there is an even better way of getting that infrastructure locked down. It is the same reason why the Romans prioritized roads. It's the reason why the colonial powers of the 1800s so aggressively expanded railroads everywhere. And it's what Tesla is looking at right now. When you look at the Cybertruck, what do you see? You see angled, deflective surfaces. You see, well, bulletproof. They say it right there. They're hitting sledgehammers against the thing and not even making a dent. The vehicle is big, it's spacious, it's powerful, it's also very minimal and utilitarian, and it's very highly adaptable. It's also cheap and it's silent. It might not attract a farmer, but there is one customer in particular who that Cybertruck attracts just fine. Tesla is making a move on the military-industrial complex. And to me personally, I could not think of a smarter move for them to make. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if this whole idea didn't come down to a conversation Elon had one day with a general in the Department of Defense hallways. He's already very strongly embedded with the Department of Defense through SpaceX. Obviously, he takes their satellites up and everything. I wouldn't be surprised if some general just happened to let slip that the military, the army, were looking to, in a couple of years, put a new contract out for a new JLTV. And maybe if them boys down at Tesla were to put out a nice little proof of concept in the meantime, that might help him sway the DoD into letting Tesla make a bid. if they were to win that contract, then that would cement Tesla and electric cars into the culture just fine. The US military, especially the Navy, are like one of the forerunners in green technology. The US Navy even got aircraft flying on seawater at one stage, and literally it was like 10 years ago, and I don't know what's happened with that experimentation now. That mustn't have worked out in some way. Maybe it degraded the engines too much or something, who knows. But either way, their priority is to get off of oil as quickly as possible, because oil itself is a massive strategic liability to any country. Also, what the US Army does is they advance their tech, well, they at least try to advance their tech in levels of generation. The last one they tried to do was called the Future Force Warrior system or something, and there was it kind of failed. Like, it was supposed to be this whole integrated system of new upgraded soldiers and infantry fighting vehicles and tank systems at least, and all this type of stuff. The only thing that really sort of made it through, I think, in any considerable form, was the Stryker ICV. What that was a six-wheeled armored, basically, shell, and that shell they used in order to make a whole variety of machines. There was the infantry combat vehicle, there was the mobile gun system, there was an ambulance variant, an engineering variant, other things as well. And they also try to keep them all highly integrated, so they all fit into a galaxy transport. They all run on the same components and parts, so therefore they only have to make a certain amount of parts, and therefore reducing maintenance costs and so on. And they try to do this as much as they possibly can. The theory is to do this across all different platforms. My books, especially Drive 35 and Gold Digger, are set in a new near-future conflict, and I've conceptualized the next generation of this tech, and it's all electric powered, because that's obviously where it's all going to go. There is a light utility range, there is a medium ICV range like the Stryker and armored vehicle range, and there's a heavy range for like the tanks and the mobile artillery and whatever. But the light utility level, like the Jeeps and the Humvees, I based around a central platform which I called the Hum-E, which is, electric car. When the Cybertruck rolled up onto that platform, that's immediately what I thought of. I just thought, oh, that's the Hum-E right there. It's very easy to visualize an entire expanded family of vehicles from that shell. It's a unified shell. It's very simple and utilitarian. From that, it's got this big open back which they could really just plug anything onto. From that, you could get obviously the combat variants, the ambulance, the engineering, all the stuff that I just mentioned before for the Stryker, although this is a lighter variant. But you could also, if you were to pack in power banks into that back, then with expandable solar panels and external plugs and things, then you've got a fully automated platoon right there. All the other vehicles can just plug in overnight, and then they can just keep rolling. That is removing oil from the equation, and that is a huge expense and a huge strategic liability to the US Army, to any army for that matter. Again, farmers and pickup drivers and things like that, they may not be impressed by this vehicle, but I can guarantee General Motors and BAE, I guarantee they're looking at that with serious concern. I also think the Saudis are probably going to be making a few anti-Tesla moves over the next coming years, because the moment the US Army gets off of oil, they're in big trouble. The Saudi royal family, that is. I think the Saudi people would actually benefit greatly from that. But here's another thing the military does. They design all their systems around civilian infrastructure. All tanks, for example, can cross bridges, and all bridges can handle tanks. If Tesla can get the US Army adopting one of their designs as the main light utility vehicle, then solidifying the power charge network becomes a matter of strategic priority. You also get the Canadian military adopting it, you get the British military adopting it, you get the Germans, the Poles, the Australians, you get the Koreans, you get probably the Japanese, you might even get the Brazilians and the Indians adopting it as well. And all of a sudden, the Tesla 3 is looking all the more attractive to the average customer. And in fact, even the Chinese would benefit greatly in adopting this tech, because they're making their big first geopolitical expansion in terms of expeditionary missions and things, military-based missions into Africa and so forth. It's all part of this one belt, one road thing they've got going on. If all the opposing militaries are using this tech and this open source system, then it is greatly in their advantage to adopt it as well, because it allows them to use their tech. And I think actually that's why Tesla first open sourced that engine. I think they were looking at the Chinese market for that. I think they were hoping that Chinese companies were going to establish that system. If they get the US military to adopt it, I'd say the Chinese would absolutely adopt it as well, and that would cement Tesla, but the electric car concept, into the global culture. In truth, I think this Cybertruck design that we're seeing now is simply the civilian variant of something else that lies underneath the table. It's like the Hummer to the Humvee, except in that case it was in the reverse. The Humvee, of course, came first, and then they civilianized it. They adapted it for the civilian market. There needs to be more of a V shape to the underbelly of the design in order to deflect IED, like explosions and stuff, from beneath. But to me, there is no hiding the intent behind that design. Maybe start paying attention a little bit to Tesla stock and the news involving Tesla, because if you hear in a year or so's time that Tesla has been invited to bid on a military contract, then there is a chance that that stock is going to jump through the roof. If that happens, the fuel-based car industry is dead. The oil industry is dead. The strategic interest in the Middle East greatly diminishes. It's still there, but it greatly diminishes, and for the most part, the West is going to pull right back. In turn, the Saudi royal family, they're not going to have much to hold them anymore, and I think that culture will open right up. In turn, Iran would open right up. I think Syria would die down. I think Israel would open right up. And I just think the world itself will be, for better or worse, a vastly different place. Now, I am a fiction writer, so it is my job to delve into hyperbole, so this might be a whole load of shit. But that's my perspective on the Tesla Cybertruck. If you agree or disagree, put it down into the comments below, and I'll see you for the next video.